now we have just 28 minutes of group feedback and comments, so if you can keep any comments short. We do have to rejoin the plenary at 4 p.m. Now, delegate from Sri Lanka got in first, so he'll be the first speaker. If there are other speakers, if perhaps Asti or Dita can just get the name and the country or parliament of the other speakers. So if the Vice Speaker of Sri Lanka is still here? No.
India.
Oh, okay. Well, I will put in a plug for the work that Sri Lanka's done in terms of localising the SDGs and a great committee report. So we'll go first to the lady, then to the gentleman here in white, and we'll get Asti and Dita, if you can get people's names and countries on a piece of paper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I would like to thank all the presenters. I'll try to be as brief as possible.
And could you introduce yourself and your country or parliament?
Okay, I'm Thokozani Kupe. I'm the leader of the opposition in the Zimbabwean Parliament, former Deputy Prime Minister. My question is directed to Mr. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, development is the ability of a country to satisfy the needs of the people using its own resources, and the needs being food, shelter, health, education, infrastructure, clean water, amongst others. And this is what sustainable development goals are about, to make sure that basic needs are given to each and every citizen so that they have a better life. You spoke about scrutinizing legislation. For me, my question is it about scrutinizing legislation, or is it about lack of political will from the executive? If you look at my country, for example, in Zimbabwe, anti-corruption efforts are governed by more than 8 laws. 8 laws are in place to fight corruption. The problem has to do with implementation of those laws to the letter and in the spirit in which these laws were put in place. So my question is it about scrutinizing the legislation, or is it about lack of political will from the executive in implementing that legislation so that corruption is fought? Corruption has become endemic. It is sending most of our citizens to the deepest end of poverty. It has destroyed the social fabric of our citizens, and it has to be fought. For me, I think the problem is lack of political will from the executive in implementing the laws that exist to fight corruption. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take the comments and then I'll call it the end for the speaker's responses. Next, our delegate from India.
I am from La Ganeshan. I am from India, La Ganeshan. And my experience with India is different from the previous speaker. And we have proved that corruption can be curbed and stopped and minimized. Before that, I am glad to have this opportunity to share my views in this session. As you are all aware, transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted with the UN Summit on Sustainable Development held on 25th September 2015 in New York. The new agenda has a holistic approach to the sustainable development with its balanced emphasis on the 3 pillars of economic growth, social development, and environmental protection. It reaffirms the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. Friends, the 2030 Agenda and its actionable core of 17 SDGs resemble India's own vision of development. Government of India's initiatives such as smart cities, Make in India, Beti Bachao, Beti Badhao means protect the girl child and educate the girl child. Swachh Bharat means clean India. Jan Dhan Yojana. About that only I want to emphasize, because I had quote many examples, but only one example I will quote from my country. This Jan Dhan Yojana is the new initiative taken by our Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi, and it has brought 300 million households in the banking system. By that, avoiding corruption and distributing the benefits of the government to the beneficiaries. And the beneficiaries who never entered into the portal of the banks, first time they have had the bank account, and the pilferage, the corruption and pilferage have been stopped successfully. There is one example I want to quote. I've got many examples to quote here. The Skill India, Startup India, and all other things closely related to several targets under the SDGs. As mandated by the 2030 agenda itself, the processes for follow-up and review of implementation will remain voluntary, country-led, and should reinforce mutual learnings and exchange of best practices. Recently, India submitted its voluntary national review at the high-level political forum at the UN on 19th July. I would like to conclude with only one word, that finally, right from the drafting of the enabling legislation to the conducting parliamentary oversight, we can see the parliaments play a crucial role for the successful implementation of the SDGs. Parliamentarians have the mandate to adopt a people-centric approach to development by ensuring accountability, transparency, and good governance. As parliamentarians, we have to make sure that implementation is on the right track. Parliamentary oversight mechanisms such as parliamentary debate, parliamentary questions, discussions under budget, adjournment motion, no confidence motion, resolutions, parliamentary committees, etc. can be very effective in identifying obstacles or assessing progress. We have to make optimum use of this parliamentary mechanism to enhance the role of the parliament in the oversight of the country's efforts to achieve the SDG. The Bhagavad Gita says, Yadadi achariti tatro idrajanaha. That means whether the bad deed or good deed, it percolates from top to bottom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the gentleman in the front, and was there a lady at the back? Yes. Lady in white next, then the lady in the black top next. Sir.
Thank you, moderator. I am Parmod Chand from Fiji. I am a member of parliament and from the opposition party. We have 3 members in the parliament of Fiji from the National Federation Party.
Are you in Biman Prasad's party or the Sudelpa? Okay.
Biman Prasad's party, thank you.
All right. Who is the chair of GOPAC Fiji? So we'll make sure we join you up.
Thank you. I'm just, it was very interesting hearing all of you and the very valid points that they were very pertinent from all of you. However, as we come from Fiji, you might know that we have come out of 5-6 coups, military coups. At the moment, we have a government in power which is very autocratic. And, you know, like you talked about civic engagements, we haven't had municipal elections, that is town council and city council elections from 2007. And we have been promised time and again, but it does not transpire. Debates in parliaments are curtailed and like budgetary sessions are only for a week. And we only get 20 minutes to speak and go up right to the night, midnight sometimes. And then we have to finish in 5 days. And when parliament begins, a debate is controlled in the sense, technical knockout sort of, like government brings in questions and government gets its members to ask questions in parliament, which really berates parliament. Parliament is just there for a show, and we are unable to do things. And every single bill that is brought into parliament, what actually happens, they will move a motion under the standing orders to limit the bill time, the speaking on the bill. For example, there was a bill that came into parliament in the last budget session in July. We were just given 1 hour, the sale of a national asset, Fiji Electricity Authority, 49% to a Korean company, in 1 hour. 20 minutes was the introduction of the bill by the Attorney General. 20 minutes was for the deliberation of 50 members of parliament, and then the next 20 minutes again for the Attorney General to sum up and reply. So we had only 20 minutes to sell 49% of public utilities out of the nation, and within that 20 minutes of time, the opposition, one stood up second, and the rest, the government members, start standing up. And they had all the time. So we had basically, the opposition had 10 minutes in the sale of a national asset. All these goals are very good. What I have a lot of things to say, but I know time is limited. So what I will simply say is this. This is a grand organization, the World Parliamentary Forum, SDG and all this. Absolutely good, very noble. But if these institutions can sort of pressure countries like Fiji, where the opposition is totally marginalized. Only one person governs the nation, Maybe the number one governs number two. And I'll just little bit say on the UNDP. I've had some talks with the UNDP representatives. Some of them are very fearful when they are in the country. See, they must be seen to be speaking on the government side. Basically, institutions, worldwide institutions, anybody that goes or lives in the country, they should be free of fear, because they are the ones who are taking the changes there. This is something very, very important. And I would suggest, while we are discussing all these noble ideas and plans here, it is excellent. But for this to translate into reality in the nations like Fiji, the institution will have to really put pressure on the country to see that everything is going well. For example, I was just thinking while I was sitting here, that one of the UNDP officers, not from Fiji, who's a resident based in Fiji, should be sitting in the parliament and listening to the debates and how the opposition is just shut down. The new media decree is in force, and whatever you see in the majority of the news media is only government. When we give we give press releases, that just doesn't come out. So there are many things, but with this contribution, I would love to see that this institution, this grand institution sitting here, you are able to do something about this, so that we are able to achieve the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments, and we're in discussions for GOPAC to be participating with the Parliament. I've been talking with the Speaker in this conference on localising our SDGs handbook with a Fiji parliamentary one, and with Biman Prasad and also Minister Semi from the government to have a bipartisan approach to the SDGs. So thank you for your comments. Madam Ibu.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dwi Arum Hadiati from Indonesian Parliament. Basically, I agree for all speaker has saying, but what I want to say is we are of the view that in order to fully implement the SDGs, Parliament should be equipped with enough awareness and capacity on SDGs issues. Our role as political figure is also essential in bringing more stakeholder involvement to the SDGs. By making the SDGs known by our constituents, there will be more eyes at the sub-national level to help us measuring the implementation of SDGs. GOPAC Indonesia stand ready to provide support to the Indonesian House in strengthening parliamentary work on SDGs, and that we will set some action plan to help the Parliament, including the task force to implement SDGs. We call for development partners to also support the development of the action plan. And we hope for future collaboration to further implement the handbook at the national and sub-national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I believe our chair has some good news about the Bahasa Indonesia translation of the handbook.
Thank you,
Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm Monica Mtrango. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm also the Vice President of the 15 Southern African parliaments. So the region, we have taken it upon ourselves to fight the issue of drugs, because we realize that youth demographic dividends, if we don't deal with that problem, we will not achieve the SDGs. Now, my question is actually, I've got a lot of things I would like to say. The presentations were very interesting, but I'll be zeroing in on Ms. Yunet Tarigan. My question is, when it comes to punishment, criminalization, we have noted, as a SADC group, we were in Seychelles just last month, and we realized that as a region, the people who are criminalized mostly are drug users and never the peddlers of drugs. So this is global corruption. It appears corruption knows no boundary. We actually have come up with a campaign which says, don't punish drug users, support them. Because if you walk into any prison, you will never find drug peddlers. And this is billions and billions of dollars, and we continue to lose our youth. Thank you. I would like to hear what are you saying to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We've actually had a variety of opinions and fortunately questions to different members. So we do just have 10 minutes left, so I'll ask our panellists just if they could self-regulate themselves and maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes in response. So we'll start from the first speaker, who's Charles. If you'd like to make a couple of comments, then to Franklin.
Okay. Maybe I could just respond to two of the commenters. First of all, to Mr. Chand, I think, what you say about the limits that practically exist for UN agencies in particular countries is very true. It's really hard, I think, to strike the balance between being an effective advocate for development, including democracy and good governance, and, standing up to the government of the day when that's necessary. And I think, given that the UN and its agencies are member state-driven organisations, we don't really have much choice but to, try to achieve that balance in a way that works without seeing our staff sent out of the country, which, unfortunately happens regularly now when a government feels that we've overstepped the line, especially on governance and democracy issues. So I hear what you say. I think the comments are valid, but, do understand the position that the poor old UN official is in sitting in the country. You can't do any good if you're persona non grata. I think the second comment was from the SADC colleague on drugs. I mean, I know you directed it to Unity, but I sat on the Global Commission on HIV and the Law about 5 years ago before I was working for UNDP. And I think, the overwhelming message that came out of the evidence that the Commission heard over its process of writing its report was that there's no point punishing victims time after time and this applies in the area of using drugs, in the area of human sexuality, sex work, you name it. It's far better to educate, it's far better to treat these issues as health issues and education issues. Now, UNODC has its mandate, and I won't speak in any regard about that because that's that agency's business. But I do think what you say is very powerful, and it was very impressive to see the Mahe Declaration in July from the gathering that you had in the Seychelles. Where you had your first Women's Parliament, and you decided that the theme would be keeping women and girls safe from HIV, and that whole declaration just reflects now the modern, contemporary evidence that you can't punish the most marginalised and the most left behind. You've got to help. So, thank you for your observation.
Thank you. Franklin.
Yes, thank you very much for the comments, and if I may respond directly to the question of the MP and leader of the opposition in the parliament in Zimbabwe. Yes, I mean, I very much agree with the issues which you mentioned, that it's important that legislation is implemented, and also legislation on anti-corruption. If indeed there are 8 laws adopted, this actually proves the point that the adoption of legislation as such has no value if these laws are not implemented, indeed, as you say, to letter and to the spirit. That's why I think that a rigorous system of analyzing the level of implementation of legislation is very important. The point I made is that Parliament has a very important role to do in order to establish such a rigorous system of evaluating implementation of legislation. However, Parliament is not the only actor. If for various political circumstances and in the context of the balance of power, it is very difficult to have a rigorous parliamentary system, it's also important for individual MPs then to work together with other actors outside of Parliament, because also civil society, academics, they can also set up a rigorous system of evaluating the impact of legislation, and also these are, I think, very important voices to have a thorough assessment of what are the reasons why anti-corruption legislation is not implemented. And these reasons, they can be technical, but they can also be indeed political. And these things are linked, because a technical reason can be there are not enough resources to implement a specific law. But the reason why there are not sufficient resources can of course also be a matter of a political choice. So these issues are very much linked to each other, and I think that there MPs have the possibility to work closely together with other sources of expertise which can actually beef up and give additional data to the MPs in making their judgment.
Thanks very much, Franklin. I'll ask Unity to comment, then Maria, and then I'll call on our chair to close our session today. Unity.
Thank you, John. So I would like to comment to the, I'm sorry I forgot the name, but the lady from Zimbabwe, that UNODC is very concerned about the drug use go to the jail, because first it's gonna be to overcrowded of the prison itself. So UNODC is proposed to conduct the rehabilitation for the drug use and the drug, even the drug use and also user inject drugs. So this is our comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria.
Thank you, John. I think there was no direct question to me. I just want to use this opportunity again to thank you all for your attention and presence, and to share your concerns as well. I think that you're very right. We should demand that institutions or organizations working in our countries put pressure on regimes that are not providing for democracy and the ways for transparency, and that is very important. And I'm really happy you raised it here, so that we all can have that in mind. I think we should continue working hard to achieving our goals, especially the goals that we have committed to when we all participated in drafting, and we are all participating in implementing the SDGs. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Maria. Before I hand over to the chair, I'd just remind people we're having our GOPAC AGM tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the Melia Hotel. If there are any GOPAC members present, and if there are any parliamentarians who do wish to join GOPAC, we're very keen to sign you up as members as well. I'd now like to call on the Chair of GOPAC and the Vice Speaker of the Indonesian Republic, Honourable Dr. Fadli Zon, to close our workshop.
Thank you very much, John. So I think there's some points and inputs from the floor that we have discussed in this forum. The implementing parliamentary engagement is very important, and I think this book I just received, the post-legislative scrutiny, maybe we can learn also to study about our own, especially in each country's legislation, including of course Indonesia. We have some also problems with legislation actually. And this book, this parliamentary's role in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, I think this is the first step, the first step to touch the Sustainable Development Goals towards the as a hand tools, and it's been already translated to several languages, Arabic, and I heard from John also in the process in French and Spanish. And I also received the information also in Bahasa Indonesia already. So we are going to publish this also in Bahasa Indonesia and several other languages maybe. And I think this is going to be very helpful in implementing the SDGs values to our legislation. Thank you very much for all the participation from all the floors and also from the speakers, moderator John. And I hope this discussion and workshop will be very benefit also for the parliaments and all the attendants here Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final plenary session is beginning from now, from 4 p.m, which will include the adoption of the conference statement. Thank you very much.
Hold on, wait, let's wait.